What happens when betrayal leads you straight into the arms of the devil himself? Evelyn Carter walked into her boyfriend's mansion, expecting answers. What she found instead was her entire world burning to ash, her boyfriend tangled with her best friend in silk sheets that cost more than her rent. But she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply turned to leave, unaware that Victor Bellini, the city's most feared mafia kingpin and her boyfriend's father, stood watching from the shadows. And in her silent defiance, he saw something he hadn't seen in decades: strength worthy of his world. What happened next would shatter 3 lives forever. If you want to know how revenge can taste sweeter than love, stay with me until the very end. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Evelyn Carter had always believed that heartbreak arrived with warning signs: a distant phone call, a forgotten anniversary, the slow fade of attention that people talked about in therapy sessions and late-night confessions with wine-drunk friends. She was wrong. Heartbreak didn't whisper. It detonated. The Bellini mansion stood like a monument to old money and older secrets, its stone facade glowing amber under the early November sunset. Evelyn had been here dozens of times over the past 18 months, always as Noah's girlfriend, always feeling slightly out of place among the marble columns and Renaissance paintings that probably cost more than her student loans. Tonight felt different. Tonight the house seemed to loom over her with something close to malice. She clutched her phone tighter as she approached the heavy oak doors. Noah hadn't answered her calls in 3 days. 3 days of silence after their argument about his business associates, men in expensive suits who looked at her the way wolves studied sheep. She'd asked too many questions. He'd deflected with charm and expensive dinners until she'd finally confronted him about the rumors, the whispers that followed his family name like smoke. The door was unlocked. That should have been her first warning. The foyer stretched before her in cathedral-like grandeur, all vaulted ceilings and Italian tile that echoed her footsteps like accusations. The house felt empty, though she knew it never truly was. The Bellini family kept staff, security, people who moved through shadows, and kept secrets better than priests. "Noah?" Her voice bounced off the walls, unanswered. She climbed the grand staircase, her hand sliding along the mahogany banister that had been polished to mirror shine. The second-floor hallway stretched in both directions, doors closed like sealed tombs. She knew which one was Noah's private suite. She'd been there before, though never without invitation, never without him greeting her with that boyish smile that made her forget why the Bellini name made hardened men cross the street. The door stood slightly ajar. Later, Evelyn would remember this moment with crystalline clarity. The way the hallway seemed to narrow, the way her heartbeat suddenly filled her ears like thunder, the way some primal part of her brain screamed to turn around and leave. But she was 26 years old and had been raised to believe that love meant fighting for what mattered, that relationships required courage and confrontation. So she pushed the door open. The room smelled like expensive cologne and betrayal. Late afternoon light slanted through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the scene with brutal clarity. The massive bed with its silk sheets the color of champagne, the scattered clothes forming a trail from the door to the mattress. And there, tangled together in post-coital abandon, were Noah Bellini and Jessica Chen, her boyfriend, her best friend since college. Evelyn didn't scream. The sound that came from her throat was smaller than that, more animal, a wounded noise that she'd never heard herself make before. It was the sound of something fundamental breaking, like the crack of ice before it gives way beneath your feet. Noah's head snapped up first. His dark hair was disheveled, his face flushed, and for one perfect second, he looked like exactly what he was: a spoiled 28-year-old caught doing something he knew would destroy someone he claimed to love. "Evie," he started, scrambling for the sheet. Jessica sat up slower, her expression morphing from shock to something harder, something that looked almost like satisfaction. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, and the sheer audacity of the cliché almost made Evelyn laugh. "Really?" Evelyn's voice came out steady, cold as winter steel. "Because it looks like my boyfriend is screwing my best friend in his family's mansion. Let me explain." Noah was on his feet now, wrapping the sheet around his waist like it could somehow preserve his dignity. "How long?" Evelyn heard herself ask. The question felt important somehow. though she wasn't sure why it mattered. Betrayal was betrayal whether it lasted a week or a year. Jessica spoke before Noah could. Does it matter? You were never right for him, Evelyn. You're too ordinary, too safe. She said safe like it was an insult, a curse word. Noah needs someone who understands his world. And you understand it. Evelyn turned to her former friend, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Jessica had always been ambitious, always angling for the next party, the next connection, the next opportunity to climb social ladders that Evelyn hadn't even known existed. You understand the violence, the blood money, the fact that his family... Careful. Noah's voice hardened in a way she'd never heard before. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Evelyn took a step backward, suddenly aware that she was alone in a mansion belonging to people who made their enemies disappear. I know enough. I know that your father runs half the crime in this city. I know that your business associates are murderers and drug dealers. I know that you've been lying to me about who you really are since the day we met. Then why are you here? Noah demanded, and there it was, the crack in his mask, the flash of something cruel beneath the charm. If I'm so terrible, if my family discuss you, why did you come? Because I was stupid enough to think you might be different. Evelyn's throat burned. She refused to cry, not here, not in front of them. I thought maybe you were trying to get away from it all, that we were building something real. Jessica laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was like glass breaking. Real? Evelyn, nothing about you two was real. You were his rebellion, his little walk on the safe side. A nice girl from a nice family doing nice nonprofit work. You were always temporary. The words hit like physical blows, each one finding its mark with surgical precision. Because somewhere deep down, Evelyn had always suspected this truth, that she was too ordinary for Noah Bellini, that their relationship had an expiration date written in invisible ink, that men who wore $10,000 watches and drove cars that cost more than houses didn't end up with social workers who bought their clothes at outlet malls. I'm done, Evelyn said quietly. We're done. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't send your people to check on me. Whatever this was, it's over. She turned to leave before the tears could come, before her composure could crack completely. The hallway seemed longer now, stretching like something from a nightmare. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on maintaining the dignity she had left. Evie, wait! Noah's voice followed her, but she didn't turn around. She was halfway down the grand staircase when she felt it, that crawling sensation of being watched. Her hand tightened on the banister as her eyes swept the foyer, empty, silent. But the feeling persisted, raising goosebumps along her arms. You walk away from betrayal better than most men I've known. Evelyn's head snapped toward the voice. He stood in the doorway of what she knew was the library. A man she'd only seen in passing, only glimpsed at family gatherings where she'd felt perpetually out of place. Victor Bellini, Noah's father, the patriarch, the kingpin. He was taller than she'd realized, or maybe he just filled space differently than other people. Late 40s, with silver threading through dark hair that was swept back from a face that looked carved from marble. All hard angles and sharp edges softened only slightly by what might have been cruel beauty in his youth. He wore a three-piece suit like armor, perfectly tailored, perfectly pressed, the kind of expensive that whispered rather than shouted. But it was his eyes that held her frozen on the stairs. Dark eyes that had seen too much, done too much, eyes that belonged to a man who made life and death decisions before breakfast and slept soundly afterward. Mr. Bellini, she managed, her voice smaller than she wanted. Victor. He moved toward her with the fluid grace of a predator, unhurried but purposeful. Mr. Bellini was my father, and he's been dead for 20 years, though I suspect he'd have appreciated your composure just now. He always said the best steel is forged in the hottest fires. Evelyn descended the last few steps, instinct telling her that staying above him would be seen as either defiant or foolish. I didn't know anyone was here. This is my home. I'm always here, in one way or another. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably had a name in a language she didn't speak. I heard raised voices. I came to investigate. found quite the illuminating scene. Heat flooded her cheeks. How long were you watching? Long enough to see you demonstrate more backbone than my son has shown his entire life. Victor tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. She didn't. Some stubborn part of her refused to give him that satisfaction. Long enough to see that he's an even bigger fool than I thought. I should go. Evelyn moved to step around him. His hand caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her. His skin was warm, his grip precise, the touch of a man who knew exactly how much pressure to apply. I have a proposition for you. Every alarm bell in Evelyn's head started ringing. I'm not interested in whatever... Revenge, Victor said simply, releasing her wrist. Real revenge. Not gossip or social media posts or slashed tires. I'm talking about the kind of vengeance that will hollow out my son from the inside. The kind he'll feel every single day for the rest of his life. Evelyn's breath caught. Why would you want to hurt your own son? Because he needs to learn that actions have consequences. Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes, something that might have been disappointment or some anger or some complex cocktail of both. Because he's been coddled and protected his entire life, and it's made him weak, reckless, stupid. And because what he did to you, he paused, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly, shows a fundamental lack of respect that I find intolerable. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you work for Hope Harbor, the nonprofit that helps trafficking victims. I know you grew up in Portland, that your father was a teacher and your mother was a nurse, both deceased. I know you have a master's degree in social work from Columbia and $73,000 in student loan debt. I know you drive a 10-year-old Honda, live in a fifth-floor walk-up in Queens, and volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends. Victor said all of this in the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. I make it my business to know about anyone who spends time in my home, especially anyone who gets close to my family. The casual invasion of her privacy should have terrified her. Instead, Evelyn felt something else, a cold realization that she'd been swimming in waters far deeper than she'd understood. You had me investigated. Thoroughly. You came back clean, which is more than I can say for the last 3 women Noah brought around. Victor gestured toward the sitting room. Walk with me. 5 minutes. If you don't like what I have to say, you'll never see me again. Every rational bone in Evelyn's body screamed at her to refuse, to walk out the door and never look back. But something else stirred beneath the shock and hurt. Something darker. Something that wanted to see Noah's face when he realized the magnitude of what he'd lost. 5 minutes, she heard herself say. The sitting room was all leather and dark wood, bookshelves lined with first editions that were probably worth more than her annual salary. Victor moved to the bar, pouring amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses without asking if she wanted one. He handed her a glass, then gestured for her to sit. Evelyn remained standing. What exactly are you proposing? Marriage. He said it like he was suggesting coffee. Evelyn actually laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. You can't be serious. I'm always serious when it comes to business. And make no mistake, this would be a business arrangement. Victor took a measured sip of his drink. You marry me. You take the Bellini name. You become part of this family in the most official, most public way possible. That's insane. She stopped, realizing she'd been about to say, old enough to be my father, to a man who could probably have her killed with a phone call. 22 years your senior. Yes, I'm aware. Victor didn't seem offended. But I'm also wealthy, powerful, and capable of giving you a life most people only dream about. More importantly, I can give you what you really want right now. Revenge so complete, so devastating, that your ex-boyfriend will spend the rest of his life regretting what he threw away. By marrying you? His father? Evelyn shook her head. That's not revenge. That's psychological warfare. Exactly. Victor's smile was blade thin. Noah has spent his entire life competing with me for power, respect, legacy. Now imagine his humiliation when the woman he betrayed, the woman he considered too ordinary for his world, becomes his stepmother. When she sits at the head of this table, when she bears the Bellini name and commands the respect he takes for granted. The cruelty of it took Evelyn's breath away. Why would you do that to your own son? Because he needs to learn that his actions matter, that he can't simply charm his way out of consequences. Victor set down his glass with deliberate precision. And because you intrigue me, Evelyn Carter, you walked in on a scene that would have sent most women into hysterics, and you left with your head high and your dignity intact. That kind of composure is rare, valuable. I'm not some prize to be won. No, you're not. You're a woman who's been wronged, who deserves better than crying into her pillow while the people who hurt her move on without consequence. Victor moved closer, and Evelyn forced herself not to retreat. I'm offering you power, protection, a position in a world that usually chews up and spits out people like you. All I ask in return is that you play the role convincingly. Play the role, Evelyn repeated. You mean pretend to love you? Love has nothing to do with this. I'm talking about a partnership. You'd live here, attend family functions, present the image of a devoted wife. In exchange, you'd have access to resources most people can't imagine. Want to expand Hope Harbor's reach? Done. Want to wipe out your student loans? Consider it handled. Want to ensure that no one, and I mean no one, ever hurts you again? His eyes glittered like dark ice. That's what being a Bellini guarantees. Evelyn's mind spun. This was madness. Criminal madness. You didn't marry into the Mafia to get revenge on an ex-boyfriend. You didn't tie yourself to a man like Victor Bellini, a man whose business card probably had a body count on the back. What about what I want long-term, she asked. What happens when I want out, when I want a real relationship with someone I actually choose? We'd establish terms, a timeline. This doesn't have to be forever, though I reserve the right to renegotiate if circumstances change. Victor paused, his expression unreadable. But I'll be honest with you, Evelyn. The moment you take my name, your life changes permanently. You'll see things, know things, be part of things that will make you understand why people fear the Bellini family. There's no going back to who you were before. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to give you informed consent. He said it so matter-of-factly that Evelyn almost laughed again. If you say yes to this, you need to understand what you're accepting. The danger, the violence that exists at the edges of my world. The fact that my enemies will see you as leverage, and my allies will test you to see if you're worthy of the name. And if I fail those tests, you won't. Victor said it with absolute certainty. I've survived in this business for 25 years by reading people accurately. You have something most people lack, the ability to adapt without losing yourself. That's what makes you perfect for this. Evelyn looked down at the untouched drink in her hand, watching light refract through the crystal. Upstairs, Noah was probably spinning some explanation to Jessica, or maybe they were laughing about her dramatic exit. Tomorrow, they'd continue their affair without consequence, without guilt, without any understanding of what they'd destroyed. The thought ignited something dark and fierce in her chest. If I did this, and I'm not saying I will, what would the actual arrangement look like? Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, like someone else was asking the question. Victor's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted almost imperceptibly, like a chess player recognizing a worthy opponent. We'd marry within the month. Quick engagement, very private ceremony, though the announcement would be extremely public. You'd move into the east wing of this house, separate quarters with complete privacy. We'd share certain spaces for appearance's sake, dinners, family gatherings, public events. I'd expect discretion, loyalty, and the ability to handle yourself in difficult situations. And in return, financial security beyond what you've ever imagined, protection from anyone who might wish you harm, access to resources that could expand your nonprofit work exponentially. Imagine what you could do for trafficking victims with actual funding and political connections. Victor enumerated each point like contract terms, and the satisfaction of watching Noah realize exactly what he lost. What about affection? Intimacy? Evelyn felt her cheeks heat but forced herself to ask. Are you expecting? No. Victor cut her off cleanly. Unless you wanted that, this would be a marriage in name only. I'm not interested in coercing anyone into my bed, Evelyn. If physical intimacy ever became part of our arrangement, it would be because we both wanted it, not because you felt obligated. The answer should have reassured her. Instead, it raised more questions about what kind of man Victor Bellini actually was beneath the tailored suits and casual violence. "I need time to think about this," Evelyn said finally. "You have until tomorrow night. Come to Giano's at 8 o'clock. It's a restaurant I own in Manhattan." Victor pulled a card from his jacket, holding it out to her. "If you show up, I'll take that as your answer. If you don't, we'll never speak of this conversation again." Evelyn took the card, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. His hands were warm, steady, the hands of a man who'd never trembled over a decision in his life. "One more thing," Victor said as she turned to leave. "That friend of yours, Jessica. She's been feeding information about Noah to the Costello family for 3 months. They're rivals of ours, in case you weren't aware. Noah's too blinded by chemistry to see he's being played." Evelyn stopped. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand that the betrayal you witnessed upstairs goes deeper than sex. She was never your friend, Evelyn. She's a plant, an opportunist using both you and my idiot son for her own agenda." Victor's voice hardened. "If you walk away now, fine. But know that the people who hurt you are worse than you imagine, and they'll never face consequences unless someone makes them." The words settled over Evelyn like a mantle, heavy and dark. She left without responding, walking through the mansion's halls that suddenly felt less like a home and more like a fortress. The front door closed behind her with a finality that seemed to echo through her entire body. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, her hands shaking too badly to turn the key. The card Victor had given her sat on the passenger seat like a live grenade. Giano's. Tomorrow at 8. A simple dinner that would change the trajectory of her entire life. Evelyn pulled out her phone, scrolling to Noah's name. 17 missed calls. 32 text messages. Each one some variation of, "Let me explain," or "It's not what you think," or "Please call me back." She blocked his number without reading them all. Then she drove home to her 5th-floor walk-up, climbed the stairs that always smelled like someone's curry dinner, and locked herself in her tiny apartment that suddenly felt suffocating. She stood in the shower until the water ran cold, scrubbing her skin like she could wash away the memory of what she'd seen. That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, researching Victor Bellini with the thoroughness she usually reserved for case files at work. What she found painted a picture of a man who'd inherited his father's criminal empire at 23 and had expanded it into something that touched everything from construction to shipping to waste management, all the legitimate businesses that provided cover for the ones that weren't. But there were other details too. Donations to children's hospitals, always anonymous but traceable if you knew where to look. A scholarship fund for underprivileged kids interested in business. And, this made her pause, a substantial grant to Hope Harbor 3 years ago, given through a shell company that she now realized connected back to Bellini interests. Victor Bellini had been funding her nonprofit. He'd been supporting her work before he'd ever met her. The revelation should have felt manipulative, like another chess move in whatever game he was playing. Instead, it felt like confirmation of something she'd sensed during their conversation, that Victor Bellini was far more complicated than the monster Noah's behavior had implied. Morning came without sleep. Evelyn called in sick to work, the first time she'd done that in 3 years, and spent the day in a fog of indecision. She made lists. Pros and cons. Rational arguments for why this was insane. Equally rational arguments for why walking away meant letting Noah and Jessica win. By 7 o'clock that evening, she still hadn't decided. By 7:30, she was in the shower washing her hair for the second time that day. By 7:45, she was standing in front of her closet, staring at clothes that all seemed wrong for dinner with a Mafia kingpin who'd proposed a marriage of vengeance. At 8:15, Evelyn walked into Giano's wearing a simple black dress and heels that made her ankles wobble. The restaurant was elegant in that understated way that screamed wealth. No prices on the menu, no visible staff unless you needed them, lighting designed to make everyone look like they belonged in a European film. Victor sat at a corner table, perfectly positioned to see the entire room while keeping his back to the wall. He stood when he saw her, and Evelyn felt the weight of every decision she'd ever made leading to this moment. "You came," he said, and she couldn't tell if he'd actually doubted she would. "I came," she agreed, letting him pull out her chair. A waiter appeared with wine before she'd even settled. Victor must have ordered ahead, must have known she'd show up despite her uncertainty. The realization should have annoyed her. Instead, it felt almost reassuring, like he'd seen something in her that she was only beginning to recognize in herself. "Have you eaten?" Victor asked, the question absurdly domestic given what they were actually here to discuss. "Not since yesterday." Evelyn realized it was true. Food had seemed impossible, her stomach a knot of anxiety and anger. Victor signaled the waiter, ordered in rapid Italian that made her aware of how much she didn't know about him, how much she'd be entering blindly if she said yes. When the waiter left, Victor folded his hands on the table, his full attention on her in a way that made her feel simultaneously exposed and seen. "I assume you have questions," he said. "1,000. Evelyn took a sip of wine to steady herself. "But let's start with the most important one. Why me? You could marry anyone. Someone from your world. Someone who understands the rules. Someone who wouldn't need to be brought up to speed on how this all works. Because someone from my world would have expectations I'm not interested in meeting. They'd want power for themselves, would see marriage to me as a stepping stone to their own ambitions." Victor's expression remained neutral, but his voice held an edge of something that might have been weariness. "You want revenge? Yes. But beyond that, you want to continue your work, help people, make a difference in ways that have nothing to do with my business. That makes you safe. Predictable. I'm not sure whether to be offended by that." "Don't be. Predictability is valuable in my world. Most people are chaos dressed up as ambition." He paused as their first course arrived, something with scallops that looked like edible art. "I need someone I can trust not to try to kill me in my sleep or sell information to my enemies. Someone who has clear boundaries and won't try to expand them at my expense." "And you think that's me? Based on a background check and 5 minutes of conversation? Based on watching you walk away from humiliation with grace, based on 3 years of quarterly reports from Hope Harbor showing exactly where every dollar goes, including my money, based on the fact that you're here, terrified but sitting up straight, asking hard questions instead of just accepting what I'm offering." Victor's eyes held hers. "You have integrity, Evelyn. That's rarer than you might think." The compliment landed strangely, warming something in her chest, even as her mind screamed that she shouldn't trust anything this man said. "What happens to Noah?" "He learns that consequences exist. Beyond that, it's not my concern." Victor cut into his scallop with surgical precision. "He'll continue to work in the family business. I won't cut him off completely. But his position will change. His standing in our world will shift. People will know that he disrespected someone under my protection and that I took action. By marrying the woman he cheated on. By honoring someone he treated as disposable." Victor's correction was subtle but significant. "In my world, how you treat those weaker than you matters. Noah forgot that. Or perhaps he never learned it in the first place." They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was extraordinary, each bite a reminder of the life Victor was offering. A life where scallops cost more than her weekly grocery budget, where wine came from vineyards she couldn't pronounce, where every detail was curated and controlled. "I need guarantees," Evelyn said finally. "Legal guarantees about my safety, my autonomy, my ability to walk away if this becomes unbearable. We'll have a prenuptial agreement drawn up. I'll have my lawyers include clauses protecting your interests, financial settlement if we divorce, assurances about your physical safety, terms around the marriage itself." Victor seemed unsurprised by her demand. "Anything else?" "My work. I need to keep working at Hope Harbor. I can't just become some trophy wife who shops and lunches." "Agreed. In fact, I'd prefer it. The best covers are built on truth, and your genuine dedication to that work makes our arrangement more believable." Evelyn set down her fork, her appetite deserting her despite the incredible food. "I can't believe I'm actually considering this." "Neither can I, if I'm being honest." Victor's admission caught her off guard. "I expected you to walk away, to decide that revenge wasn't worth the cost. The fact that you're still sitting here says something about either your courage or your capacity for calculated risk. I'm interested to see which one it is." "Maybe both," Evelyn said quietly. "Maybe I'm tired of being the person who gets hurt, while everyone else moves on without consequences. Maybe I want to see what happens when I stop playing safe." Then you have your answer. Victor reached into his jacket, producing a small velvet box that made Evelyn